use could be quite different at times. You may have heard the quote from George Bernard Shaw that England and America are two countries separated by a common language. We call our pocket calendars, we call them date books, or maybe planners. They call them diaries. Pastor Hughes would be talking, he would refer to his diary. And what he's talking about is what I would call my date book. And he would put dates in his diary for things upcoming in the church. And that's the language that they would use in England. We have yield signs. If you ever go there, they have giveaway signs. Now, it means the same thing, but they use different words. We go to the restroom. They go to the toilet. Now, in Northern Ireland, you can say some very embarrassing things without realizing it if you're not careful. And I'll just tell you this, to nurse a baby doesn't mean in Northern Ireland what it means here. Pants are not trousers in Northern Ireland. I learned that when I was preaching there once, and I was talking about Jezebel wearing the pants in the family. And everyone began to chuckle, and I thought, I've said something wrong here. I don't know what it is. And pants in Northern Ireland is a reference to underwear. So there's an example of what I'm talking about. So you can speak the same language and still have some real difficulties communicating. But we're told that at this time, just a few generations after the flood, men still spoke the same language. They all still had the same dialect, the same vocabulary. So it was very easy for people to communicate with one another. And we're told they journeyed from the east, eastward. And by the way, you'll find as you read through the Old Testament that whenever people are moving eastward, it's always bad, because they're moving away from the west, from the direction of God's land, God's place, where God makes himself known, moving away from Eden. They're moving eastward. So they're moving eastward, it says. And they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and there they dwelled, and there they settled. Now, where's the land of Shinar? This is important. Shinar refers to an area in the Mesopotamian valley, including what is later described as Babylonia, a fertile area between the Tigris and Euphrates River. Later, it was the seat of the Babylonian Empire. So this is the setting. Now, let's notice some things about this. First of all, what they determined to do. Verse 3, then they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. Now, that language reflects something that's true of the geology of that area. There were plenty of stones to use for building in Egypt and Palestine, but not in Mesopotamia. In Mesopotamia, people had to make bricks. And here we see this tremendous technological advancement. People had learned by this time to shape the clay mud in that region into the form of bricks, which they then learned to put into a furnace to bake in order to harden them, and they learned to make a kind of tar to use for mortar. So this was really a brilliant piece of technology and human advancement for those days. And let me just pause here to make a practical comment or two. First, here we do see something of the genius of man. Man is created in God's image. He's not just an animal. And God has placed within man this tremendous capacity for creativity and invention and discovery. How did these men come up with this idea of making bricks from clay and baking them and making a kind of asphalt for mortar? How did they come up with that? I don't know for sure, but probably they observed the effect of the heat of the sun upon clay. They noticed when the sun is beating down upon it, it gradually became harder. And so they began to think about this and to experiment with this, and they kept working on it until eventually they developed this whole technology of brick making. And then they learned to take that brick and to build buildings with it, to build a city, and so on. And there's something very wonderful and amazing and impressive about the human race. Man created in the image of God. You think of all the inventions and developments over the centuries down to our present day. Medicines, vaccinations, tremendous advancements in medical science and in manufacturing and energy production, nuclear science, automobiles, mass transportation, airplanes, television, rockets to the moon, space stations, satellites, computers, internet, cell phones. Think about the arts as well, and the beautiful paintings and music and all of these things. The list goes on. Man has been given this tremendous capacity for invention and creativity, but at the same time, this also highlights the great tragedy of the human race. As we go on to see in this narrative, and as we see throughout history to this present day, man is so wonderful in so many ways. We ought to live in a perfect world. But there's this terrible problem with mankind: sin. Since the fall, sin has defiled and distorted everything. All this technology is amazing, and often it's good in itself, but there's this terrible flaw in mankind, the thing called sin. And all of these wonderful advancements are so often used for evil. They're so often used in defiance of God and to harm others. And also man, with all of his ability to do so many things, all of these things completely fails when it comes to controlling himself. He's a slave to his own sinful passions, selfish pride. And so men in these early days on the plains of Shinar are making these bricks with asphalt for mortar, and they come together and they develop a scheme, okay? A plan. Verse 4. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the earth." So with the use of this brick-making ability, the plan is first to build a city, a kind of interconnected, organized urban center or civilization. As another commenting on this points out, I think they're correct. Really, a civilization is just the city idea kind of developed and extended, okay? Well, it's people coming together under some kind of centralized government in order to live together and to organize their joint existence for commerce, mutual pleasure, and security. So they stir each other up to this great project to build a city and then also to build a tower whose top is in the heavens. So here's the plan. We're going to build a city and a tower. There's a social goal. Let us build a city. There's a religious goal. Let us build a tower. As we're going to see in a moment, the tower most likely had a religious significance. But there was also what's been called a psychological goal. We've considered what they determined to do. But now, secondly, why did they desire to do it? Here's the psychological goal, the motivation. It's twofold, really. First, they're motivated by the desire to make a name for themselves, the text says. Let's build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Not for God, not for the glory of God, not for the honor of God, or to enable us to serve God better, but let's make a name for ourselves. Here we'll